This is The Clash, where the real world clashes with a true Christian worldview. Join former professional wrestler Chris Whaley, known as the Masked Saint, who is an author, pastor, and teacher that brings his wrestling skills into the squared circle and tackles real-life issues. Along with Jeff Dixon, best-selling author, internationally known teacher, leader, and pastor who is not afraid to tackle the tough issues of the world we live in. Together they form a tag team of wisdom in The Clash.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of The Clash, where we take a Christian worldview and allow it to clash into the culture around us. When it's done, it's our hope and our prayer that maybe we'll say something that will encourage you, inspire you, shine God's light and love into your life, and to have a little fun along the way.
Oh, yeah.
I'm Jeff Dixon. I'm joined by Chris Whaley. Hey, Chris.
Hey, man, I tell you what, it has just been kind of awesome to have, Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, on last week, and we get to continue that.
Yeah.
Now,
this guy's a Hall of Famer. I mean, he's a legend.
He is a WWE Hall of Famer. I mean, you just about can't name a big name that Ted DiBiase hasn't worked against.
Right.
I mean, this guy has worked against, Hulk Hogan, Undertaker, Ultimate Warrior. He's worked against everybody. And just a great, great guy. And so we're going to pick it back up and just keep going with it. Ted, welcome back. It's great to have you, and just want to keep going. Well, Ted, let me ask you, how did you become the $1 Million Man? How did that take place?
When so we're going on, and we moved back and forth in the territories. The last time I moved back from Georgia to what was called Mid-South, I moved to Jackson, Mississippi, because my wife's parents are from Mississippi. And I said, this way, and I have a son, Ted Jr., a baby. And, that way my wife and child can be near her parents. That's why I moved to Jackson. And it was in, I think it was 87. I had this great deal in Japan. I would go back and forth in Japan. I actually read this in a paper in Japan. WWF sets world indoor attendance record. 93,000 people at the Pontiac Silverdome in Pontiac, Michigan. The largest indoor crowd for anything. Wow. And I said to myself, well, if I'm going to remain relative in wrestling in the United States, I've got to work for that guy. Well, I go home, and a guy who had become a very good friend of mine who went to work for them, his name is Bruce Pritchard. He's not a wrestler, but he worked with the talent stuff. He says, Ted, he said, when you get back, he says, before you do anything, two things have happened. Bill Watts sold the territory, so when you get back to Mid-South, Bill Watts isn't your boss anymore. And he says, I don't want you to do anything on TV until you have a chance to talk to Vince McMahon, because he's very interested in you. And so that's what I did. And so, I go to New York, and I sit down with Vince, and he put it this way. He says, Ted, he says, he says, there's one thing everybody hates. And he says, that's someone who, by virtue of their wealth, bullies people. Mm-hmm. And I started laughing. I said, I can't stand guys like that either. And he says, that's the essence of this character that I want you to portray. And he says, I know your wrestling skills. I've seen what you can do in the ring, and I think that you can pull this off. And so we did all these vignettes where I kick a bunch of kids out of a swimming pool. Everybody's got a prize. Kick a honeymoon couple out of the honeymoon suite because I want the best room in the hotel. Just all these things to just make people hate me. I mean, the first time I walked out the door, they boo. They hated me already and hadn't even wrestled. And so that was the beginning of my journey with the New York wrestling organization.
Yeah.
And and again, it was still while I was in Georgia that I met Mel.
Well, when you became once that character was created, when did you know like that was going to be it? You had found that character, the persona that was going to stick with you.
Well, yeah, pretty much, yeah, right then.
Yeah.
I mean, because and the way they, Vince put it this way. He says, "Listen," he says, "here's what I'm going to do." He says, "I want the public to, as much as we can possibly make them believe you're that guy, believe it." So, well, how are you going to do that? He says, "Well, you're going to fly everywhere first class." He says, "You're not going to be staying at any more Holiday Inns. It's the Hilton, the Hyatt, the Sheraton, the high class hotels." And he says, "You're going to have limousine service in every city. Airport to hotel, hotel to Coliseum, Coliseum to hotel, back to airport." And you're going to be one of the hottest heels I've ever had. I said, "Yeah, to the public and maybe to the rest of the guys in the locker room." And he said, "No," he says, "I think they would take the same attitude if they'd gotten the opportunity that have jumped on it."
Yeah.
And so that's how it began. I mean, it was crazy.
Yep. My goodness. Ted DiBiase has wrestled every big name in the business, but is there one particular match for you that stands out that, hey, that was probably the greatest match I ever had?
Well, you wrestle so many times. There's I don't think you can pick one match, but I will say one of the guys that I ended up having really good chemistry with in the ring was a character they called Jake the Snake. Jake Roberts.
Yeah.
Well, Jake Roberts, his dad was also a wrestler, and he was the guy who kind of ran things for Bill Watts. His wrestling name was Grizzly Smith.
Yeah.
He was great big guy.
Yeah.
And so Jake and I had a match in Toronto, Canada. I believe it was, I think it was WrestleMania 6. And brother, we tore the house down.
Wow.
And it's because we both came from a wrestling background. We understood the psychology of wrestling and professional wrestling. And we were both very good at what we did. And so we, usually like the what they call the heel, he kind of leads the match, and we talk to each other as we're in the ring. But anyway, that match I think is probably one that I would say was right at the top.
Yeah.
Go ahead with the now again, like Chris said, I mean, you've wrestled against everybody. You've been a main event wrestler in WrestleMania. I mean, you're as big as it possibly can get, but there's no way over your career that every match went the way you wanted it to. And so you don't have to give any names, but do you have a match that comes to your head when I say which match were you in that just went horribly wrong, not the way you thought it was going to go? Anything pop into your head?
Not really. I mean, I guess when you're young, you're a young guy, and you keep your mouth shut and you listen.
Yeah.
But now when I'm, I guess there's one guy, and nobody liked him, and and to this day, I mean, he's passed on now, but they called him the Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was this great big bustle bound guy, and
Yep.
I said I could respect him for the discipline it takes to get your body to look like that. I get that. But he came into a business I was raised in and knew all my life. And it was like treated it like crap.
Hmm.
I mean, it's kind of like he didn't give a $3 a hoot about anybody or anything.
Yeah.
It was all about him, and in this business, when you get in that ring with a guy, you're working together.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You're working together to tell the story, the match,
Yeah.
and for some reason, this guy thought he was King Kong. And anyway, yeah, of all the matches I've had, and I had a match or two with him, and I just, so you're going to do it my way, or we're not going to do it.
In the Bible, the church is called the body of Christ. Hopefully, you have a place that you call home when it comes to church. And hopefully, you attend there and hopefully, you find a connection with other people. But also, we live in a world where we are connected digitally and online. You're more than welcome to come visit the church at 434. That's where Chris Whaley and I are part of that staff. The website, touchandchange.net, touchandchange.net. Use the QR code to get there. You'll find all sorts of resources that will help you in your journey of faith. We look forward to seeing you at the church at 434.
Okay, I'm going to give you a little bit of trivia here, Jeff.
Okay.
Ted was the first match for Hulk Hogan when he worked at Madison Square Gardens. In other words, Hulk's first match at Madison Square Gardens was against Ted DiBiase.
Wow.
And that match was my last match as part of the then New York territory.
Huh.
Okay.
I was wrestling in the Garden that night, and Vince McMahon Sr. was still there. He was still the boss.
Mm-hmm.
And he came to me and he said, Ted, he says, we've really got high hopes for this guy. And he says, I know you'll do it right, but I want you to really get him over.
Yeah.
And I said, you got it. And so went out with the guy that nobody knew and put him over like and again, he was his first appearance in Madison Square Garden, and it would be my last appearance there for a long time because I went back to Mid-South, and I can't remember what year that was.
I think it was 1987.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, and because so then Hulk becomes the guy.
Yeah. When you became a Christian, Ted, now, was there any? We recently had Hal Jeffrey on. I know you know
Yeah.
Hal, and
Yeah.
I think Hal told us the story that because of your faith, there were some things that you were not willing to do in wrestling. Can you say something about that, or?
I don't know what he would be talking about. Well, and I'll be honest with you, and until the crisis in the relationship with my wife Melanie happened, I drifted away.
Yeah.
But Melanie's at home and she's going to church, and the thing that changed everything was when I got caught. I remember calling one home. I called home one night, and I was actually in London, and Melanie hit me between the eyes, and discovered that I was cheating and that I had been unfaithful. And I said, I don't want to talk about this anymore on the phone. I'm going to be on the first plane home. She goes, you don't live here anymore. Click.
Mm.
And thank God and I thank God every day that he put this guy in my life. His name is Hal Santos. He's a pastor. He was a senior pastor all the time, but I met Hal I met him in a gym in Baton Rouge. The first person I called was Hal.
Mm.
And I said, Hal, I've ruined my life. I'm going to probably lose my wife, and I don't deserve her. And He said, and let me make a couple of phone calls and I'll get you back to you. So Hal made arrangements for Melanie to fly to St. Louis, and I'm in Europe, and I went to Vince and I said, Vince, I said, I'm sorry, I said, but this is what's happened. My wife has, found out that I've been running around like an idiot, and I got to go home. He says, I understand, and so he said, go. So I flew into St. Louis and took the longest 30-minute ride of my life to face Melanie. And, you know, when you get into sinning, you start making excuses for it, and you can talk yourself into just about anything.
Mm.
Just so happens, I think this is a God thing too. It just so happened that as this is happening, Hal has to take his youth group from his church to this event they were holding in Chicago, and I don't know if they do it national, yearly or not, but it was called the Ascension Convention. The speaker that first day was a guy named Reggie Dabbs, and Brother Reggie could bring it. And I'm sitting there, and as he's speaking, I'm thinking to myself, is this guy been reading? I mean, it's like he's talking to me.
Yeah.
I mean, everything he said, he said, So at the end of this, and he gives this passionate altar call. He says, if you know what you need, if you know that it's Jesus, then I challenge you to get out of your seat and come forward. So with the $1 Million Man, this guy who, and this is a room full of wrestling fans, teenagers, our target market. And and I heard it as I was in there, people saying there's Ted DiBiase, there's the $1 Million Man, what's he doing here? All I remember is I ran forward. I didn't go forward. I ran forward. I was the first guy out of my chair, and I hit the front of that thing, and I went to my knees, and I put my nose in the carpet, and I cried like a baby. I didn't care what a soul thought at that time. All that mattered to me was that I get it right with God, and apologize and apologize and apologize. And I was even. I remember saying this. I said, Lord, I know that I've blown my marriage, but I'm promising you that even though Melanie will probably leave me, I will take care of her and our son forever. I'm telling you that, Lord. I'm promised to myself and to you. And so Melanie witnessed all this. I went down and I was like a kid. I just cried and cried, cried. I didn't care.
Mm.
I just wanted to get right with God.
Mm.
And so I didn't know. And so when we got back to Hal's house, and this is again after this long ride back, Melanie came to me and it just blew me out of the water. She said, Ted, she says, I serve a God of restoration, not divorce. And every time I tell this story, she goes, and I just want you to know, I'm going to give you another chance. But I want you to know, I'm not doing this for you. You don't deserve it. I'm doing it because I want to be obedient to this still small voice in my heart for whatever reason it's telling me to give you another chance. No promises. I might not make it. But all I will say to you now is, I'm going to try.
Hmm.
And I looked at her that I said, if you give me this chance, I'll become the man you thought you married. I will become the spiritual leader in my home, and God willing, one day I'll regain your trust and respect.
Okay.
And now we've been married 43 years, and God has been so good. And we are closer and more in love in every aspect of it. But the difference is that Jesus is at the helm.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
Say, well, I mean, this, I mean, that story, it's moving, but it's a story of unconditional love and forgiveness. And as great as you have been in the ring, I mean, that story is what makes you a champion, right? I mean, that is your moment.
Yeah, more than anything else.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so and a lot of things had to change for me, and they did.
Right.
I promised myself that I would not wrestle physically after the age of 40. So when I got out of wrestling physically, then I went to being like a manager, a ringside manager, what have you. But and it was Hal, my buddy Hal, this guy that I met in the gym, who just kept after me, and he just kept after me. He said, "Ted," he says, "I'd like for you to share your story with our folks." And brother, that's where it started.
Yeah.
And I go to Phoenix First Assembly of God Church, Pastor Tommy Barnett. Oh my God. I can't remember a more godly person than Tommy Barnett. And he's still going. I mean, it's like, and they do this thing out there. It's a gathering that they do annually. And pastors come from all over the country, to this event. It's like a 3-day event. And, but, I went and as I started going there, I started, word started spreading that had become saved and was sharing my faith. And and then I would speak at a church, and that pastor would tell another pastor. He'd tell another pastor. Pretty soon, I got my calendar full of weekends going and speaking in churches.
Yeah. It's amazing because again, in the wrestling world, you were an iconic heel in so many ways, but you were just you were at the top of your game doing that.
Yeah.
But yet, what you've done as you've moved through professional wrestling, what you're doing is heroic. I mean, that is the journey God has had you on in some ways, even though I understand that, the wrestling piece was a character, but it's a heel to hero. And I
tell people all the time, I said, I believe that God allowed me to have this measure of fame for whatever it's worth, because he knew that one day, instead of using it to glorify myself, I would use it to glorify him. Yeah. And we're still going, and then this thing came up here in the state of Mississippi. I had and this who was the Department of Health and Human Services, the director. So a couple guys heard me speak in a church somewhere, and they said, Ted says, we can get you a grant, and I could, Heart of David. I kind of named my ministry Heart of David, as God said, David is a man after my own heart, and I said that's the heart I want to have. And so we were going along doing great, and what I was doing was I was asking pastors interdenominationally from, it was the towns all over the state of Mississippi, Meridian, Hattiesburg, Biloxi, all around. I would go and what I would do is I would invite these pastors in these communities interdenominationally to a meal. And I would share with them. I said, listen, I said, I find that a lot of churches like they have their niche. Some it's like uh, unwed mothers. Another one it's alcoholics, or another one it's to feed them and clothe them and whatever. I said, but if we as just set aside our denominational differences, come together, if you gentlemen would develop relationships within your community, then somebody comes to you and they need counseling on their marriage, and well, that's not really my niche, but if you go to that pastor over there, because now you have a relationship with that pastor over there, he can help you. And they started doing that. And that's what I was starting to do when it all kind of hit the pan.
Jeff, you got anything else?
Well, I mean, and I want to encourage you. I mean, God's using you, and He's using your story, where you've been. You're faithful. You're trying your best to flesh out what you understand you're supposed to be and do. I mean, you're being obedient, and so God's going to bless obedience, and He is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just want you to know, you have blessed us with this story, because again, we can go back and we can watch a WWF highlight film, and we see the flash, we see the character, we see the moment in the ring. But you shared with us a story, and you shared with us your life, and that's a gift. Our audience, they've heard some things today they never knew about you. I have heard that as well, and I just appreciate your transparency and your willingness to share your heart, because that's what makes you you. And so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for taking the time to interview me, and this is what I love to do.
Yeah.
I love to share the story, and I do because I've also had the opportunity to see some of the results. Like there was this one little black kid, and I'm really bad. My memory, I don't have dementia or Alzheimer's. They said you've just got severe brain trauma from all the pounding. But there's certain things that I just remember, certain things I don't. I wish I can remember this boy's name right now, but it's slipping me. But he just, man, we took him under our wing, and he took off and he's going. He is going.
Well, brother, we unfortunately we're going to have to sign off, and we've got to end this thing and land this airplane, and we just really, really appreciate so much your being with us. And Jeff, any last words before?
No, just thank you for not only entertaining, but also thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
You have inspired us, and again, shown us how faith collides with the real world, and that's what we're doing here on The Clash. So thank you.
Yep.
Well, and fellas, thank you again for having me on, and hopefully this will help somebody that's out there listening.
I'm sure it will. And for you that are listening, and I know that there's probably somebody out there that, you've had some difficulty in your life. I hope and pray that through this interview of listening to Ted DiBiase, that God will use this to show you that He's not through with you.
Yeah.
And just remember, wherever you go, don't tap out.